Alrighty, folks, looks like we are live. I'm George, founder of Solo. I have with me here my friend Yale. We're going to be talking about how to avoid wage garnishment today. Yale, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, George. Again, my name is Yale Levy. I am an attorney licensed in the state of Ohio. I was a collection attorney for 20 plus years based in Columbus. I owned and operated a multi-jurisdictional law firm that worked in Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. And we used the court system to collect debts, which maybe many of you have experienced. I sold my practice, retired, and one day out of the blue, George Simon calls me and says, "Hey, you want a job? We're looking for somebody with your credentials." And before I knew it, I got a job at Solo. It's been great, and I'm here as there are two things. I do client development, so I engage with law firms so that they respond to your offers, and I also the knowledge base for collections since I did collections for 20 years. So it's nice to meet all
Nice.
of you.
Fantastic. Yep, we have lots of people here on the webinar tonight. Folks, a couple things as we're getting into it. So, quick disclaimer. We aren't your attorneys. I'm not an attorney. Solo's not a law firm. And we aren't your law firm. We aren't giving you legal advice, making an attorney-client relationship. We're just doing a webinar. Okay. We reserve a lot of the time for live questions that you have. So if you have a question, just go ahead and put it into the chat. We will get to it. Uh, our wonderful Hannah is going to be responding to some of the questions in the chat as well, if we don't get to it verbally. So whatever question you have, just put that into the chat now. And we also have some questions from people ahead of time that we'll be responding to. And also, Yale. So Yale's a past president of the National Creditors Bar Association. So that's a big group of basically law firms that are doing collections. And you guys, if you're watching, you might be wondering, uh, wow, what made Yale like flip sides, right? He's like working for the collectors, now he's working for the consumers. And uh, yeah, is that the case? Like, do you feel like you've gone to the dark side, or do you actually just feel like you're just moving things forward? Like, tell us how you think about that.
No, really, I love the product. That's what really enticed me to come on board. I tell people all the time, we're not a debt settlement company. I did not go to the dark side. I am not representing consumers. I am promoting a consumer-initiated um, settlement platform that allows consumers to make offers to their collectors and law firms to try to get their cases settled. I believe in the product. It's a great product. We are neutral in the process, so we don't take any sides. We just want to get the parties together to communicate with each other, because that's the trick to the game of settlement, is you need to communicate to get to a settlement. So I'm not on the dark side. I don't represent consumers. I don't represent creditors. I'm here in the middle with George and Hannah and other people at Solo trying to make this thing work. And it's been great. And it's been a great experience.
Yeah, so folks, yeah, so at Solo, right, we work closely with consumers. We're also building partnerships with collectors, and we're operating on this key premise that we've realized, which is collectors and consumers actually want the same thing. They want an ideal settlement as fast as possible. And the key is really figuring out what that ideal settlement is, right? I think consumers, there's a lot of anxiousness or like anxiety or concern around not getting a good deal, right? From the consumer perspective, somebody might think, um, you might be thinking, like, hey, the collector bought the debt for 4% of the face value. Uh, if I don't settle for 5%, am I getting a bad deal? Am I like shooting myself in the foot? And then on the collector side, they're thinking, um, and my client, like you might be working with a lawyer who is hired by like Discover Bank, and that lawyer is thinking, well, Discover has legally required me to not settle for anything less than 70% of the face value of the debt. And man, is this person that hasn't paid the debt, is the borrower, are they actually like a millionaire, right? Do they actually have a ton of money locked away in a bank account somewhere? And if I give them like a deal, am I going to be shooting myself in the foot? Right. So there's really, a lot of like questions around what is the ideal amount. So with Solo, we're working closely with consumers, right? A lot of consumers trust us very closely, and we respect that trust. And we're also working with the collectors to help people understand what the ideal settlement actually is, so people can just move on with their lives and get these things wrapped up pretty quickly. Right, so that's what we're doing. And in regards to wage garnishment, yeah, what is wage garnishment? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
So wage garnishment is a post-judgment vehicle that allows the creditor that obtained the judgment to make an application to the court via motion to ask for the ability to garnish the defendant's or the consumer's wages. And there's a filing that gets filed with the court. It sets out how much is owed, and then it is sent to your place of employment. The employer then processes that garnishment and then takes from you a percentage of your take-home pay. We typically call these involuntary collections because instead of the consumer voluntarily paying, now the tides have turned and the collector or law firm or creditor is able to take money from your paycheck without even asking you for it. So that is why settlement of these debts is so important, because when you settle with the law firm or creditor, you have some control in the process. You could pick how much, how long, and when, which gives you control and makes you able to work within your budget. If you don't communicate, what typically happens is the case goes to judgment, and then the law firm will look for your place of employment and start taking money without asking you from your paycheck every pay period. Now, every state is different. I'm in Ohio, and just to let you know, cannot provide any legal advice. These are just suggestions and my own thoughts and opinions. You need to seek legal advice from an attorney in your state that you have a relationship with to get legal advice. So with that being said, communication is the key.
Right. Yep. So communication is key, folks. I will add on wage garnishment, a huge thing that you really want to avoid there, and one of the reasons why a lot of people respond to these lawsuits using Solo is if you don't respond and you lose your lawsuit and then you get into wage garnishment, you're actually going to be subject to statutory interest. Across the U.S., statutory interest is usually going to be like 10%. So that means if you're sued for like $10,000 debt, you lose it. Now you're getting charged for $10,000 plus 10% interest over time until the balance is fully paid. Whereas if you settle through Solo Settle, usually we're going to be getting a deal where the debt isn't growing, the interest rate has been stayed, and so even if you're making small monthly payments, at least you aren't going to be paying off interest as well. It's all just going to be going to the debt that already exists. Yeah, we have some great questions here, so let's jump into them. We have a question from Charlotte in Texas. Why can't I file Chapter 7 bankruptcy using Solo due to the fact that I have a mortgage? We have a generous homestead exemption, so my home should be protected. I plan to reaffirm the mortgage if required. I've received different options from attorneys on reaffirmation being required in Texas. Thank you.
Wow, that's a lot of different issues in one question. So you're right, there are two different kind of chapters, a chapter 7 and chapter 13. And chapter 7 is a bankruptcy for individuals who want to discharge most of their debts via liquidation, basically selling whatever assets you have and liquidating your debts and being done. Chapter 13 involves a repayment plan, also known as a reorganization, which usually is involved when there are assets of the bankruptcy estate that you don't want sold and then you want to keep. And therefore that happens becomes a repayment plan. Chapter 7, across the country, costs about $338 to file. Chapter 13 is about $313 plus attorney's fees. Both of them do have attorney's fees. There are also some other costs involved in filing a bankruptcy, credit counseling, debtor education courses, both run between $10 to $50 each, but it also has to be done to get you discharged from the bankruptcy. So Chapter 7 is usually better for people that have unsecured debt, like credit cards and medical bills, don't have much property or income, and need fast relief. Chapter 13, of course, are for people that have some secured debt or assets, and they have some property and high income, and they want to repay their debts at some percentage rate to their creditors. A reaffirmation agreement means that the bankruptcy discharges you of all your liability. But if you sign a reaffirmation agreement, as the woman mentioned, that means you're agreeing to keep that obligation and keep that asset, but you still have that liability post bankruptcy. I hope that helps answer your question.
Great. Yeah, I think that's helping for Charlotte. Folks, just by the way, we're happy to answer the bankruptcy questions that come up. We did reschedule with our expert on bankruptcy until a future week, but me and Yale, I think, are ready to talk to that as well. So with this, person in Charlotte, right? So, or rather, Charlotte in Texas. Charlotte, great job getting to a place where you uh, have a home, right? So great job buying a home. Sorry you're going through this situation with considering bankruptcy. I think some considerations that I would do, right? So chapter 7 is what people usually think of when they think bankruptcy. That's where like you actually are deleting your debts to a large degree, like you're actually getting discharged. Whereas chapter 13 is kind of like bankruptcy, kind of like weak sauce bankruptcy to some degree. I wouldn't even really say like bankruptcy light. You're just getting onto like a payment plan where you're paying off most of your debts just over time. And usually in chapter 7, you have to give up your home if you're doing that. Uh, but correct me if I'm wrong. Charlotte's saying that there's like a homestead exemption in Texas. That's essentially that's like the concept that you can do 7 without giving up your home.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That homestead exemption could maybe cover the equity in her house. And if that's the case, she might be able to keep the house, but she needs to consult with a bankruptcy attorney. In Texas, I do not know the Texas laws, even though it's a federal statute. The homestead exemption and some other exemptions are state specific. So you need to talk to a Texas attorney, bankruptcy attorney, about that.
Right. For sure. Uh, yeah, and then Charlotte, if you want to use Solo to do that, we aren't offering bankruptcy. Uh, you can use a partner of ours called Upsolve that does Chapter 7 bankruptcy for free. You can also, talk with lawyers as Yale's talking about. Those are all good options. Um, and there you go. Those are some options for you. Oftentimes, and my take is that if your debt to income ratio isn't very high, then debt settlement will usually be the better option for you. Debt settlement, you can, hack off uh, a pretty good portion of the debt, or you can get onto really low monthly payments and pay that back over time. You won't have as much of a damage to your credit score either while you're going through the bankruptcy. And, like high debt to income ratio. So, debt to income ratio is a really key factor in all of this. It's what banks use to determine if somebody can take on more debt. Banks look for a debt to income ratio that's not higher than 36%. That means that 36% of your income every month isn't going to pay off uh, debt, right? So you want to be 36% or below. If you tallied up all of the payments that you have to make on the debt and then divided that by your income, if it's higher than 36%, then you're probably in somewhat bad shape. If it's like over 100%, then that point you should probably be considering bankruptcy. But really, if it's only like 50% or 60%, or if you have a lot of money sitting around in a bank account somewhere, like definitely don't want to go down to you don't want to go down the bankruptcy path. All right, we got another question from. Let's see, we have another question from Ronald in Missouri. Hello, Ronald. If you're on the webinar, feel free to chime in with some more comments in the chat. Ronald says we owe roughly $70,000, not including our house and one vehicle. We retained, uh, you know, yeah. So you owe him 70,000. That's quite a bit, Ronald. Quite a bit. We retained an attorney and talked to him during the initial retainer call. We paid the promotional $1,600 for the all-inclusive radio promotion. It has been almost 2 years. I guess you're talking like you paid 1,600 for a bankruptcy promotion, I suppose. It has been almost 2 years. We continue to update our monthly reports, but still our case, like our bankruptcy case, has not been filed. We've been told numerous times by different paralegals that it should be filed by the summer of 2024, which that was last summer, by Halloween, and then it drug out to Thanksgiving. It got delayed to Christmas, and then before 2025, and on and on. We've been sued by a creditor. I went to court once uh, for 6 months because the judge continued to grant our extension request because we told the judge that the case should be filed any day. Okay, so it sounds like this case is just like drawing on and on, right? So the person started the bankruptcy process almost 2 years ago, and it still hasn't actually been filed. Finally, the judge had had enough and issued a judgment against me. My question is, can I sue for my $1,600 back? Do I have any legal recourse? Would this have any impact on our filing using Solo?
Wow, that is a lot of information. Um, I'm a, so, attorneys are governed by bar associations. Um, I would suggest, and I don't know who you are, and I don't know who your attorney is, so I have really no fight in this game. I would call the bar association in the county or city that you live in and explain to them what has gone on the last 2 years or 18 months and see if they can help you get this resolved. A bankruptcy should not take over 18 months to be filed unless you have not provided all the information or they're waiting for something. I do not know the specificity of your case or what is going on, but that does seem to be a little bit abnormal, having the process take that long. Again, there are bar associations. You can look it up on the internet. I'm sure Missouri has its own bar association that will help you reach out to the attorney and find out what's happening.
Right. So you're saying Ronald should contact the Missouri Bar Association about his bankruptcy attorney.
Yes,
Basically, what you're saying. Yeah.
correct.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, basically, Yale's saying it sounds kind of grievous what the bankruptcy attorney may have been doing. We don't know the full story, right? We don't know exactly what's going on. We're just getting your take on this, Ronald. But based on what you're saying, it seems like something's wrong with the bankruptcy process here. Maybe the bankruptcy attorney is not doing a good job, right? It shouldn't take 2 years to file for bankruptcy. Um,
Right.
so yeah, sorry to hear that that case finally closed on you because Bankruptcy was never coming through. Uh, so Ronald, and FYI for everybody, right? If you go to the Solo dashboard, you just log into your Solo account. You go to your dashboard now, you can click the Ask Solo button, and you can chat and get tips on whatever your situation might be and kind of get pointed in the right direction. I encourage you to go there and just ask all of your questions there. Very good product. You can check that out. Uh, yeah, what else would you, uh, what other advice would you have for Ronald here? I mean, thinking kind of more broadly, like financially. What do you think? Like, so you had
Well,
70, you had 70K in debt.
right. What I'm impressed about is he's gone 18 months, if not 2 years, without filing for bankruptcy, and it seems like he still has his head above water. So my question, my question would be, do you really need bankruptcy if you can still keep things afloat for the last 18 months? Again, I don't know the specifics of your situation, Ronald, unfortunately, and I'm not licensed in Missouri, so I can't help you directly. But again, if you've made it this long, do you see light at the end of the tunnel? Have you paid off some of your debts, or are they growing? I don't know that at all, but those would be some of the questions I would be asking at this point, since you've been waiting this long and nothing has happened.
Right, indeed, Ronald. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And oftentimes, getting out of debt and dealing with bankruptcy and these kinds of things can take a lot of time, right? And something to consider is, really trying to figure out how you can get more income, right? Rather than limiting, like dealing with the downside, limiting uh, the expenses, dealing with bankruptcy. Right? It might be a good question to ask yourself. You're still alive after these 2 years, still floating. Is there a path that you can go down to get more income? It sounds like you own your house, so congrats there. At least you have a mortgage on the home. What can you do to get more income? Can you start up a side hustle? Can you make a little business on the side? What can you do to start paying off these debts? Can you cut expenses other places in your budget? I mean, sometimes when we're talking with people, right, they might be sued for debt and they're saying, I don't have any money to pay this off. Then we take a closer look at their budget and they're going to Chipotle every day for lunch. And, just like fast food is like a great way to just, great expense to limit to get more money that you can put towards paying down debt and increasing your net worth, really. All right. Next question here from Charles in California. My wife and I have around $100,000 in credit card debt. We both are paying them back through a debt negotiation company. Our debt is separate. I'm on Social Security disability and I'm barely making enough money to keep my head above water. I was injured on the job and I was unable to return to work, so that's how I ended up in debt. Sorry to hear it, Charles. That really sucks. Sounds like a bad injury. My disability payments ran out. And I have to live off credit cards to stay afloat. My wife, on the other hand, is employed and makes good money. Okay, yep. Sounds like you have a sugar mama there, so that's also a win for you. But my wife has run up substantial credit card debt. We have both been sued by some of our creditors, and I personally have a case pending for July with a Discover card. I owe them, presumably you owe Discover, roughly $9,000. They have been unwilling to work with the debt settlement company that I'm working with. What are my options?
Wow. So there's a lot of options that you have, since you do have some income from your wife and maybe from your disability, which I think you said might have ceased. But you should try to reach out to Discover and try to settle with them directly. I'm sure they'll take something less than the full balance. How much less, I can't tell you, but I would start somewhere between 55 and 65% of what you owe. So maybe like 5 grand, and work your way slowly up as they work their way slowly down to try to come to the middle. I would again explain to the law firm that sued you your exact hardship, that you're injured at work, you're disabled, you don't have income coming in, and that this is the best you can do. Discover has some hardship programs, I'm sure, that will help you get that case either dismissed or resolved or settled amicably by you offering to do monthly payments over time. Um, yes, 9,000 is a pretty large amount, but if you could get it down to 5 or 6 or 7 grand, maybe you could get it paid off in 2 to 3 years, which would be helpful to you and your credit. Um, Again, maybe trying to cut down some of your expenses, some of the spending that you and your wife does would help. Again, tightening your financial belt and doing what you can do to save some money to pay off these debts one at a time would be great. We do have a product called SoloSuit that allows you to digitally communicate with your creditors without talking on the phone. So if you are hesitant to talk to them or you don't want to pick up the phone and call them, you can use SoloSuit to do that for you as well. But again, what you and your wife need to do is sit down, make a budget, and decide what you can afford to pay before you even offer to make a payment to somebody. So that's probably step one. Sit down with your wife, make a budget, kind of sketch out what the next 2 to 5 years are going to look like, and try to find a way to either file bankruptcy, which will impact you for the next 7 years, or try to settle the debts one at a time, or multiple if you can, based on your wife's income and whatever limited income and assets you might have. So those are some options available to you to try to resolve this situation that you have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Charles, I'm sure there's a solution here that we can figure out that'll work for you. As Yale was saying, contacting Discover to get this thing settled is likely the best path. Best way to contact them is through SoloSuit. It's very similar to like contacting them directly. SoloSuit kind of operates as a mediator the between the consumer and the collector. So we work a bit more closely with the creditor than like a debt settlement company would. And we're also able to, give you more of a personalized take based on your finances. And we will, you communicate the hardship that you've been through, like loss of job due to disability. You communicate that to us, and then we'll package that up and deliver it to the collector for you. Um, yeah, it sounds like the sticky situation here for Charles is pretty much that uh, his wife is making quite a bit of money still, right?
Right, well, that gives him some fuel to try to get some of these cases settled and pay
Right.
off some of these debts.
Well, I
Again,
think I think there's probably some question to him about whether or not his wife owes these debts or not. He's saying that they're separate. Uh, I'm not an attorney in California. Uh, I believe that California is a bit more of a common law or common
right, I think
property
it's called
state.
community property state.
Yeah, I believe California is a community property state where your guys' assets are going to be shared to some degree. So I would imagine that the debt collector in California is probably would be thinking that his wife would be on the hook for these debts, right?
Yeah, again, I'm in Ohio, I'm not in California. I don't know California law. He needs to go talk to a California attorney.
Yeah. Yes, Charles, that's something to look into. A lot of states have a common property where if you got this debt after you were married, then both people are going to be on the hook for the debt to some degree. Uh, and then, 100K in credit card debt is a lot. That's a lot of bad debt, right? Unless you plus your wife are making a lot more than that a year, it seems like bankruptcy might be something to consider here as well. Imagine the debt to income ratio is pretty high. Uh, I would have to know what your income's like to determine that, but that's something to consider. There you go. We have time for one more question.
Great.
Great. Let's take a look. So we have a question. Uh, okay. We have a question from Nanti. When negotiating with a law firm for a credit card debt, is it bad if I mention that I am considering bankruptcy?
Not at all. I would not be ashamed of that. It's not a bad thing to say. Unfortunately, so many people say that and they never do it, that most collectors and law firms discount the statement. So saying it probably had very little impact, if any, to the collector that you spoke with. Again, it isn't always an option for you. A fresh start in life sometimes sounds good, but it does take you some time to rehabilitate your credit after filing bankruptcy. If you can afford to settle your debts without filing bankruptcy, that's probably the preferred manner if you can do it. But again, not the ultimate manner. You always have bankruptcy available to you so that these debts don't hang over your head for the rest of your life. You just need to make a decision and talk to competent bankruptcy attorneys or counsel about what your options are and what your makeup of assets and liabilities look like. You can do that pretty easily. Most bankruptcy attorneys will give you a free initial consultation, either face to face or via the phone, and that will help you create a roadmap to decide, should I try to pay my debts voluntarily out of my own pocket or file bankruptcy and start over? There are implications to both. Both have legal and moral and ethical issues attached to them. And it's something that you can only decide for yourself. Nobody would judge you for filing bankruptcy, but it's an option and it's always out there for you if you need to use it.
Nice. All right, folks. On that, we can pretty much close. We have a lot of exciting things happening at Solo. If you haven't logged in, taken a look at your dashboard recently, I encourage you to go take a look there. You can see your credit report. You can find other debts that you might not know about. You can chat with our Solo AI, which AI has passed the bar exam, CPA exam. You can have those conversations with it and try to get tips on your situation, find out how you can manage your finances better, what you can do to get out of debt, etc. We're also going to be connecting financing, financial snapshot into the app. So pretty soon here, you'll be able to like review all of your finances in the app as well, and get tips on your finances and budget. All right, folks, we are here for you. We're working every day to make your financial health better. So thanks for showing up on the webinar. Until next time, take care.